Good afternoon. So I wanted to discuss really quickly here the interview that Tucker Carlson had with Vladimir Putin, President Putin, yesterday. I'm in no way taking Putin's side on this issue. I'm not even taking the United States side. I'm not even taking the UN's side, okay? Because as they say, to every story there's two sides, sometimes three. So I watched the whole interview last night, and if you might have watched it, Putin spent probably the first 25, 30 minutes just giving us a history lesson, which me, being a history buff, I loved. And he basically went on to give us a history lesson of Russia going back as far as 862, okay? And so there's a lot of history there, and how Ukraine came about and things like that. I'm not going to get into details. You can go watch it. But I think it was very important. Some people might have watched it and say, oh, this is boring. I can't believe why he's saying this. And I haven't watched what any of the politicians or talking heads, the media, have said about it. I don't know. But I'm assuming that someone probably said it was just nothing but fluff, nothing but wasting our time. I think it was very important that President Putin took the time to lay down the foundation of Russia and who Russia is, so that we can see how we got to where we are now, how we have the nightmare that we have going on in Ukraine. And I think he perfectly and beautifully laid it all down right to today. And I give him a lot of credit for that. Again, I'm not taking his side, but he laid this foundation down so that we understand why and what is happening. I like to use analogies. I'll use the analogy that I come in to your family, to your household, and now we know that in our family there's history. There's people in our family for generations, and there's some history, some good blood, some bad blood that has come through the years and the decades and maybe even the centuries. So I just step in, being a nobody, knowing very little or just a tiny bit of the history that's behind you and your loved one or your family. And I come in and I tell you how or what you should do, how you should resolve this problem without knowing the history behind it. And I tell you that you should give in to your family member who you don't talk to, or whatever reason may be, you have an issue with, without knowing the history, without knowing how you got there to the point where you are right now. I really need to dig deep down and find out, why are you guys at this point? Why did you get to this point? And I think, as I said, Putin lays it down perfectly in this. I watched a video, even before the Ukraine-Russia war, by Professor John Mearsheimer, I believe his name is. Mearsheimer. I'm going to attach it here so you can watch it. It's from 2015. And I watched it, I believe it was like in 2020. And he beautifully explains why Ukraine is the nightmare that it is. And Putin mentions it in this interview. He mentions it a couple of times, how it goes back to not even just 2014, but even before that. So if you don't want to be a sheep and you just want to, don't want to listen to what their talking heads are telling you, I encourage you to watch this video, because it clearly lays out on how we are where we are right now. And Dr. Mearsheimer, he actually goes on to explain how we can avoid this. And sadly, the Obama administration and other U.S. administrations didn't take the appropriate measures, or the UN or NATO, to avoid what has happened. So and he goes on to explain a lot of other things, and he goes on to explain how he had asked Bill Clinton in a meeting if Russia had a good chance of becoming a NATO member. And Bill Clinton straight out, at first he said maybe, and then he came back to him, he says, no, there's no way that you will become one. So, it was kind of discouraging to hear this, especially in light of how, if we go back to how the USSR was broken down, in 1991, 92, how it was broken down. And Putin goes on to explain this, and how the USSR, on their own accord, went and broke down Gorbachev broke down one of the biggest nations that ever existed in this world. And he broke it down, and he gave independent states their own, autonomy and things like that. They were doing it out of hoping and they were doing it hoping to get in the good graces of the West, of NATO, of the UN. And no, they kept kicking Russia out. They kept talking about them. They kept taking sides against them. They even went far as trying to establish a coup or have a coup in Russia in 2014. Again, go watch this video. And so he just goes on. So I kind of understand. I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't back Putin, and I don't agree with some of the things he's doing or saying. But again, that's his nation, and those are his people. And there's other things in there. But one of the things that I always go back to, and I'm going to end this video with this, I go back to the hypocrisy of the West, the hypocrisy of NATO, of the UN, and even more, the hypocrisy of my own nation, the United States of America. Because when the USSR broke down, when the USSR was torn apart, it was with the understanding that no NATO nations will be allowed to have borders on Russian borders. That was with the understanding. That was the treaty that they signed. I'm trying to think what the name of the treaty was. Anyway, I know it's mentioned in the video. So they went with the understanding that, hey, listen, it's okay. We're gonna try and establish a new relationship with the West, but don't put NATO nations on our borders. And what has what has Ukraine been trying to do? They've been trying to become a NATO partner. What has Finland done? What has, I believe, is the Netherlands? These countries that were not NATO nations have either joined or are looking to join. And so, of course, Russia, because NATO nations, if one goes to war, they all go to war. So if there's a conflict between, let's say, Ukraine, and if Ukraine was a NATO nation, just on the treaty alone, every other nation that's a NATO nation would have to attack or fight against Russia. They are now, but not directly, indirectly. They're by giving weapons and all these things. But why do I say the United States is the biggest hypocrite there is? I give you the Monroe Doctrine. Go look up what the Monroe Doctrine says. Basically, the Monroe Doctrine was that the U.S. didn't allow any enemies, any of her enemies, foes, adversaries, or competitors to have borders on the United States or to have military on the United States borders, whether Mexico, Canada, wherever it may be. So that was basically what the Monroe Doctrine says. Go look it up and you'll see. So my thing is this: if we as a nation can argue and can fight and not want our opponents or our competitors or whoever you might think they be to establish bases, military bases or borders on our own borders, then who are we to say that other countries can't expect or require the same thing? So anyway, the interview was very, very interesting. He shares a lot of things. I wrote a lot of notes down last night while I was watching it. It's a 2-hour interview. It took me about 3 hours because I kept pausing it to write notes down, and I didn't bring it with me. So I figured, let me just, shoot it, off the cuff, off the hip, and just share it with you guys. So I'd be interested to know what you guys think about the interview, if you saw it or not. And if you didn't, I highly encourage that you go watch it. But I mostly encourage you to go watch this video that I'm going to link. God bless you.